Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be putting together an inexpensive small form factor gaming PC that you'll be able to play any AAA game on. This build consists of some new parts and some used parts, but you could go either way with it. There's a few things you could substitute. You could go with more storage, more RAM, less RAM. It's really up to you. As we're building the unit up, I'll go over all the parts used, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. First things first, talking about the motherboard here, we've got a B550 system, so AM4 isn't done yet. And this setup here was actually a used board that I picked up on eBay a while ago. It's the Prime B550M from Asus, nothing super special. And it's a micro ATX board, so it's a lot larger than a mini ITX, but we can still go relatively small form factor with it, depending on what case you use. And as for the CPU we've got here, I opted to use the AMD Ryzen 7 5700G. $100 over on eBay, 8 cores, 16 threads. We're not going to be using the integrated graphics here. We've got a dedicated GPU for this build. When it comes to keeping that 5700G cool, I opted to use the ID Cooling 903XT. It's just a small tower cooler. You could always get away with using a stock Wraith cooler, but since I picked up the 5700G used on eBay, it didn't come with one. These are like $26, maybe even less over on Amazon right now. And I'm not going to install it on the board just yet. I'm actually going to wait until I get it inside of the case because we do need to make room for the GPU in this smaller form factor case we have here. But moving over to the RAM, this utilizes DDR4, relatively cheap right now. I've got a dual channel 16 gig kit here from T-Force, and 16 gigabytes should get you by just fine, but I've actually got 2 extra sticks here, so I can bring this up to a total of 32 gigs. Storage is where you can spend a lot of money, and I would recommend running your operating system from an M.2 drive. You can get out cheaper going with like 512 and then get a larger SATA drive to store your games, or you could even store your Steam games on an external drive if you want to. But I've got a 2 terabyte Viper drive here, and that's what's going to be going into this rig. As for the case we're going to be using here, it supports a mini ITX or a micro ATX board. It's definitely a lot smaller than a full tower. It supports an ATX power supply, and these are like $30 over on Amazon. There's several different manufacturers that make basically the same type of case. This one has the mesh front panel, but there's some with like RGB fans pre-installed. You can pick from a few different styles, but I wanted that plain Jane version just to keep the price down on this build as much as possible. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be adding my cooler after I get it inside of the case, and the main reason here is with that cooler installed, it's going to be physically impossible to get our GPU in here. The front panel on this case doesn't come apart or anything like that. So we're going to drop this right down in, and there's a chance I may need to remove the RAM also. But once I get this down in there, I can connect the front I/O, and then we can talk about the GPU we're going to be using. With this case, there's actually several different options that we can use. We don't need to go super small form factor with it, but for this setup, I'm going to be using the Intel Arc B570. I do think a lot of people have still been sleeping on these. They're $229 over on Newegg right now, 10 gigs of GDDR6 RAM, and it does handle 1440p with some scaling, 1080 maxed out with most everything on the market right now. A single 8-pin PCIe connector, and this Challenger version from ASRock fits in this case really nicely. So I did have to remove the RAM in order to get this in, and you do kind of have to angle it in at first. The front panel on this thing doesn't come off, but you can slide it right down in there. Then we can slot it in, and it fits pretty nicely, but that's the only downside. I mean, if we have that CPU cooler installed in the RAM, there's just no way to get this in here. Now's a good time to think about extra case fans, and this will fit 120mm fans up front. I'm personally not going to be using any fans up front, and it might sound crazy to some people, but this thing is not going to overheat. I'm going to be using one 90mm fan in the rear just to draw air out. We've got that larger tower cooler that's also going to blow directly towards that fan. GPU is going to take care of itself, and all of that heat inside of the case will be vented out of the rear. And the way we're going to mount the power supply is also going to take care of some airflow through this unit. If you want to add some fans up front, you can definitely do it. But with this setup, I personally don't think we're going to need it. And by the end of the video, we'll take a look at our total temps. The final thing I need to add here is the power supply. Again, it supports a full-size ATX up top. I'm going with the Thermaltake Smart BX1 550 watt. Lots of cordage here, so I do need some zip ties. If you can afford it, I would highly recommend going with a modular power supply. And I do want to flip this around. That way it'll draw some air out of the case also. A few zip ties later, it actually came out really nice. It's a pretty clean little build, even though we don't have that modular power supply. Everything kind of tucks up really neatly up in the front of the case. I'm going to be running Windows 11 Pro on this machine, but there's two things that we need to do from the BIOS. So in order to get there, once we're booting it up, I'm just going to press delete on the keyboard a few times. It'll bring us right into the BIOS, and yours might look a bit different depending on what board you use. But from the main menu here, it's called Easy Mode. Right at the top, we need to enable resizable bar. This is very important for these ARC cards. Performance can definitely be increased with this enabled. And unfortunately, some of these boards do come with it turned off. Next thing we want to do is make sure our RAM is running at the proper clocks. You can see it's at 2400 over here, but we've got 3200 megahertz RAM. So we're going to go to the advanced section, AI tweaker, AI overclock tuner, and turn it to DOCP. This is going to take us right up to 3200 megatransfers per second. Once we've got that set, we can save, exit, and get right into Windows. Okay, so now that we've got the BIOS out of the way, a couple other things here. As you can see, we've got that Ryzen 7 5700G, 8 cores, 16 threads. We took that RAM up to 3200 megatransfers per second. And of course, we've got that Intel Arc B570 with 10 gigs of VRAM. Once you have the drivers installed for this Arc GPU, you're going to get the Intel graphics software. Right here, resizable bar is enabled. We did it from the BIOS. This is really important with these Arc cards. From the profile section, it'll scan through your library, find your games. You can set up different profiles for each game. Under graphics, frame synchronization, low latency mode. But what I'm worried about here is the performance mode. So we've got our metrics and tuning. GPU tuning, I usually just go to advanced, and the only thing I really change with these ARC cards, be it the B570 or the B580, is our power limit. And on this ASRock card, we can take the power limit up to 112%. So not a lot there, but there is some overclocking you could do also. Personally, I just take this up so we can get those higher clocks. It's going to burn a little more energy, but this setup here is going to handle that 112% power limit just fine. I'll apply changes. I did mention by the end of the video, we'll take a look at our CPU temps and our GPU temps because we didn't add any fans to the front of this. I'm going to be using hardware info. It's going to be running continuously in the background. And so far, I've already done a little bit of testing, up and running for around 2 hours here. We have not hit thermal throttle on that GPU or the CPU. Looking pretty good. But the first thing I wanted to show off were some benchmarks. When it comes to Geekbench 6, I was actually pretty impressed by the score we got here with this 5700G. Single core 1926, multi 9723. Of course, it's not a Zen 5 chip by any means, and we're seeing much higher scores on these newer chips, but it's $100 over on eBay. So yeah, this thing's definitely going to work out. Next up, we've got 3D Mark Steel Nomad. Total score here, 2,819, and we achieved an FPS of 28.20. Finally, Time Spy with the total score of 12,524. Graphics score looking great here with that B570, a little over 13,000, and the CPU score is just scraping over 10,000. Not too bad. Just taking a look at these synthetics, we should be able to get some 1440p gaming out of the way on this machine. First game we have here is Cyberpunk 2077, and the motherboard we're using has a PCIe X16 3.0 slot. This B570 can do up to the 4.0 slot. You can gain a little in some games, but right now we're at Ultra 1440p, and we're getting over 70 FPS on average with this. I didn't think we'd be able to hit this at 1440p, and with that Ultra preset, it does take XeSS to quality. Taking it to balanced will net us a little more, but I didn't see it go under 60 while playing through this at Ultra 1440p on this setup. But if you're craving just a little more, XeSS frame generation was recently added to Cyberpunk along with Intel's low latency mode, or XeLL. With that enabled, same settings here, 1440p, Ultra, we're getting over 100 FPS on average, and this feels really nice. I've been a big fan of XeSS frame gen. Unfortunately, it's not added to a lot of games yet, and hopefully that does change down the road. Checking out Marvel Rivals at 1440p high with XeSS set to balanced. This also has XeSS frame gen, but since it's an online multiplayer game, personally I wouldn't want to use it here. Not too bad at 1440p, but this is one of those games that's just fine at 1080, and with that you can take it all the way up to Ultra. God of War Ragnarok actually performed way better than I thought it would. We're at 1440p, XeSS set to balanced. We don't need frame gen with this, getting over 90 FPS on average. And if you take a look at Afterburner up in the top left-hand corner, you can see that the B570 is pulling around 73 watts, and the GPU and CPU temps are looking pretty decent here, given that I didn't add an extra fan in the front of this thing. But again, I'll be monitoring this through all of the tests. I always like to test at least one fighting game, so I went with Mortal Kombat 1, 1440p high with XeSS set to ultra quality. Really great. We're at a continuous 60 FPS with this, and it felt super smooth. Borderlands 3 has been a bit hit or miss recently, and with this setup here, it's not horrible at 1440p high once you get those shaders cached, but you can see every once in a while it just kind of falls on its face for a quick second. Just caching new shaders throughout this game really sucks. And finally, Forza Horizon 5, 1440p Ultra. I mean, this performs really well on the B570 paired up with this 5700G. In some cases, I mean, it reaches 150 FPS. Now, that's not the average here. We actually averaged 130 FPS with this game. The last thing I wanted to talk about here were CPU and GPU temps. So we've got a pretty beefy cooler on this. I mean, given the CPU itself, compared to, let's say, the Wraith cooler that came stock with the 5700G. Side panel on, stock fan curves from the BIOS on the CPU, stock fan curves for the GPU. Average CPU temps, 1440p gaming with everything we tested, were only 68 degrees Celsius. And the maximum I recorded, well, running all of the tests throughout, was 79, so it did blip up to 79, never hit thermal throttle there. And as for the Intel Arc B570 GPU, I was a little worried about this because it's so low in the case there. And remember, we even upped the power limit to 112%. Average 1440p gaming temps were only 61, and the maximum I recorded with this was 76 degrees Celsius. So you could keep it a little cooler by adding a 120mm fan up front, but these parts aren't pulling so much energy that they need massive blowers on them. In the end, I think this build turned out really nice, and it is relatively small form factor when you compare it to, much larger PC cases. That's one of the reasons I like building in this, but it does give us enough room for a larger GPU, and you could go with that micro ATX board and save some money there too. But if you're interested in putting something like this together, I will leave links to everything I used in the description. Some of those parts over on Newegg, Amazon, and some used parts over on eBay. And if there's anything else you want to see running on this, let me know in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.